Any questions in the room? I would like to request for assistance to get a microphone here, or if we have mics on the floor, please say your name. If you have a question to any of the panelists, please specify. There are hands here on this row. All right, go ahead, sir.
Thank you very much. My name is Dr. Elzer Pagambwa. I'm the Dean at the Institute of Peace Studies and International Relations at Kima University College here in Nairobi. First of all, I'd like to thank you all for your inputs. It's very enlightening. I have two questions. One goes to Professor Lumumba, and I want to take it away from politics to get back to the memory. You mentioned the silence that we experienced back in 1994, and what Madam has just described seems very familiar with what is happening in the Eastern Congo. We see people are singled out, who are reduced to stateless, and we see even people eating them like choma. What does it take for our regional governments at least to recognize that these people are denied their citizenship rather than categorizing them as terrorists? That's number one. Number two goes to Dr. Mutebi. The genocide against the Tutsis in Rwanda raised a deeper question. It's the question about the post-colonial nation state in Africa. Because this nation state has become like a continuation of the colonial state with all its characteristics. A state that is remote controlled, a client state, a state that is alien to its own people, a state that doesn't report to the people, but report to the former masters. Which is why we see in West Africa, for example, people are questioning this state and talking about refoundation. In some of the mechanisms you talked about that question the current perception of democracy are going back to our way of parava, our way of what you call discussions, communal discussions that lead to good decision-making positions. So in your view, because this goes beyond Rwanda, it goes beyond Kenya, it is really an issue of concern in most of African countries. Do we reform the nation state, or do we revolutionize the nation state? Thank you.
Thank you. Prof, you want to take it?
Thank you very much. I know the attention spans are now tested, so I'll be very brief. One, the post-colonial African state is very fragile. We must never forget that. It's fragile because if you look at any typical post-colonial African state, as I said a little earlier, you have nationalities, nations divided. So if you look at the situation, for example, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, you'll find one ethnic group on either side of the border. Whether it is in Rwanda, whether it is with Burundi, whether it is with Central African Republic, whether it is with Angola, whether it is with Zambia. So alive to those realities, what must be done? In my view, we must rethink governance. If we don't rethink governance, then we are not going to resolve the issues. And I think as early as 1940s, an African-American, John Henry Clark, said that all African countries, when they regained their independence, they inherited systems of government, and they tried to mimic those systems of governance, and he said, none of them will ever succeed on the basis of such mimicry. So what must be done? What must be done is that countries must deliberately make efforts. If it is the Democratic Republic of Congo, I believe an all-Congolese Congress to rethink constitutions and how we are going to govern ourselves. How are we going to accommodate traditional governance systems? How are we going to define governance? If it is Rwanda, if it is Burundi, it is not a comfortable conversation, because there are people who are also invested within the current power structures. The political elite who are indigents of those countries thrive, they have become multi-billionaires, they have power, and they love these systems of governance. But the reality is, if you look at many African countries, the message that is emerging now, if we don't rethink governance, then many of these countries are going to collapse. And I need not mention countries, but you can see, look at what is happening in Sudan today. Within less than 1 year, potentially you can create 4 different countries. How are you going to resolve it if you don't have a conversation? It is not going to be easy, but it is a conversation that we must have. If we don't have it, we are merely postponing the problem. And it's not unique to Africa. Look at Europe, what was used to be the Soviet Union. They had to grapple with that issue. Look at India after independence. They had to grapple with that issue. The emergence of Pakistan, the emergence of Bangladesh. Look at Latin America. So these are issues that we don't want to discuss, but I'm telling you, we've got to discuss them. And as I've said, as I conclude, cast your eyes over the map of Africa, and I conclude by cast your eyes on Somalia, cast your eyes on Ethiopia, cast your eyes on Sudan, cast your eyes on Cameroon, cast your eyes on the Democratic Republic of Congo, cast your eyes on Nigeria, and answer that question for yourselves. If we don't resolve it now, future generations will have to resolve it, either by force or through negotiations. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof.
In response to the question whether we should reform the nation state or revolutionize it, I mean, my answer would be simply to reorder state-society relations. I don't know whether that's what you would call revolutionizing. What I mean by this is that in many of our countries, we ordinary citizens have very little say in what goes on around us. And we've been seduced by this idea that once you have elected your leaders, whether the president or members of parliament or local leaders, that's enough. They are going to now represent you. They are going to work in your interest. I think this is only a theoretical idea, but in practice life doesn't work like that. When I was describing the various forums that I see in Rwanda where people are constantly discussing things to do with their communities, with the country, that's what I call reordering state-society relations. How do you bring ordinary people into actively participating and thinking about what they want to happen to them, what they want from the government? And I think this is what Professor Lumumba calls rethinking governance. Incidentally, last week I had a very long argument with a friend of mine from Germany in Kampala. And again, we were arguing about Rwanda. And her contention was that why does the government of Rwanda want to involve people in all these things that they're doing? Why do they force people to participate in communal work, for instance? Why do they force them to do these other things? And I was saying, well, if they didn't create spaces for them to participate, you would be complaining about them being excluded. Now that a space has been created for them to participate, you're complaining about them being forced to do things. Now, well, as I keep saying in Rwanda that maybe we have too many forums for participation, but what I see in Rwanda has been a reordering of relations between those who are the government and the people it leads. Which reminds me of a conversation I had with the then Minister of Local Government 20 years ago, again about decentralization and community participation. And he said, you know, when we were beginning to decentralize power, we had problems with communities because they did not think that it is their place to tell leaders what to do. And they were responding to us when we said we want to create these community forums, and they said, but you don't know what you're doing. You're creating a situation where people are going to rebel against the government. Is this what you want? But they were acting within the mindset of the pre-genocide period, where the state was very authoritarian and ordinary people were not expected to say things back to people who lead them. But now, again, unknown to so many commentators on Rwandan affairs, actually there's so much space for the ordinary citizen to dissent or to talk back to their leader, or to say this is what we want, not what you're suggesting to us. And that's what I call reordering state-society relations. I don't think that we can reinvent the nation state. It has been put in place for many years. That's how things work, and I'm not sure we can re-engineer that, but we can re-engineer relations between the state and the citizen.